Exploring caves is meant to be a fun adventure, but it doesn't always end up that way. In fact, in extreme conditions, people actually end up dying. So today, we're checking out the worst cave deaths of all time.
Sterkfontein Cave Incident. It was September 29th, 1984. A cave explorer named Nuno Gomes was exploring unmapped sections of the Sterkfontein Cave in South Africa. He was accompanied by his two friends, Peter Verhulsel and Malcolm, and together they planned to lay a guideline from the entrance to the farthest point of the wet cave area known as Milner Hall. The plan was for Nuno to go in and place the guideline, while Peter and Malcolm waited outside, assisting him from the surface. Nuno plunged into the water and successfully laid the line, covering a distance of 396 feet from the entrance to the end.
How do you assist somebody from the surface, though? Because their role was to stand in the surface with the cable, and then what? Like, if the cable stops moving, you assume that there's a problem, and then you start, like, what is the assistance there? You can't walkie-talkie, you can't communicate with them at all. And also, caves with no water already are scary and crazy enough. The way you have to, like, army crawl through some sections and corkscrew through others. But if you add water to the equation, like, that's my worst nightmare.
Happy because of the success, the three decided to go back in and follow the new guideline. Once they reached the air pocket at the end, they were satisfied that they had successfully mapped this cave section. So they turned around and began to head out, following the line. As Nuno led the group, he suddenly felt Malcolm touch him. Malcolm was signaling that Peter was no longer behind them. Nuno went back to see where Peter had gone and noticed that he had entered a side tunnel. Nuno tapped Peter to get his attention and signaled him to return to the guideline and exit the cave. As they headed back, however, Peter disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed he had taken the other exit, avoiding the tight squeeze they themselves used, so they did not go back to look for him. When Nuno and Malcolm surfaced and realized Peter was not there and still hadn't come out after a while, they submerged once more to look for him. They searched along the guideline and even in the side tunnels, but there was no sign of him. After 4 long hours, they ran out of air tanks, and the stirred-up silt reduced visibility to almost nothing. Finally, late that afternoon, they exited the cave and called for help. The fire brigade arrived, but lacking cave diving expertise, had to wait for the police divers to continue the search in the evening. The silt was so stirred up that visibility was heavily impaired. The police called off the search for the night, convinced they would now be searching for a body rather than a survivor.
Well, technically, couldn't there be a chance that he's still alive since there's air pockets in there? Or is that, like, ridiculous? I guess there's probably not enough air to survive, like, an entire night. But bro, what are you doing, Peter? You did it. You mapped the cave. You did the thing that you wanted to do. Why not just get out? Just get out. Or at least, like, tell the guys that you're going. Why is he just disappearing like that?
What no one realized was that Peter was not dead at all. He had been sidetracked by a secondary tunnel, and the cave's complex 3D structure, combined with the lack of a guideline, the stirred-up silt, and the darkness, made it nearly impossible for him to orient himself. After trying many possible paths, Peter found a small room and decided to wait there for rescuers. He shone his light into the water in hopes of signaling his friends, but when no one came for a long time, he switched it off to conserve the little battery life remaining. He tried making noise by banging his tank on the rocks, but to no avail. Eventually, he became exhausted, fell asleep, and lost track of time. After that first night of searching, the police closed off the cave so no one else—
Wait, but like, you can survive a couple days without food and water. So as long as he just stays in there, you'd think that, like, eventually one of these cave divers would find the little nook or cranny that he's in. How do they not find him?
Unfortunately, the silt took a long time to settle, so visibility remained poor. Convinced Peter had not survived, the police decided to wait a full week before resuming the search. On October 6th—
No way! They waited a week to go back in? But they didn't even find the body! They know that there's air pockets in there. They know there's a chance that he's alive. That makes me pretty mad, I can't lie. There's no way.
7 days after Peter's disappearance, they returned but found no sign of him. Another week passed before they tried again, but he was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, Peter was still alive. He had spent 14 days in complete darkness, starving and having lost much of his weight. Hoping for a way out, he decided to follow a passage leading from the small room where he had sheltered. After traveling 120 feet away from the water, he discovered it was only a dead end, so he returned to his spot near the water to wait once more for rescuers. The police continued weekend searches for 6 weeks, but they never found him and finally called off the search with no result. At that point, they reopened the dry sections of the cave, but kept the water section closed. Volunteers then began looking for a connection between the dry and wet cave systems, and Nuno joined them. His contributions were crucial. He was the one who discovered the connection where they could enter the wet section of the cave. It was there that they found a set of footprints leading to a dead end, and soon after, Peter's body. Beside his body was a message that read, I love you, Cheryl and Ma.
Nah, bro. That's gonna make me cry, bro. This is so sad. Normally, like, on the channel, we've been reacting to scary, like, horror stuff, not, like, sad stuff. These are true stories, by the way. Like, I'm sure if you look this up, like, you'll find an article about it. That's horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. Oh my God.
Later discovered that one diver had come really close to finding him as he entered an opening that was just 100 feet away from Peter's location. The autopsy revealed that he died of starvation after 3 weeks in the cave. Although we may criticize Peter's decision to explore on his own, we should also respect the fact that he fought to survive until the very end.
Oh my God, that's terrible. That's terrible. I hope that's the worst. If that's not the worst one, like we're gonna have a problem here. Next up, we have Crooked Swamp incident.
It was March 27th, 1982, and Donald Weltner, along with his 2 sons, Christopher and Roger, were about to lead a group of 12 Boy Scouts on a day of cave exploration. This wasn't Donald's first time caving, and even though the passages in the Crooked Swamp cave system were notoriously narrow, he wasn't too concerned. Donald was bigger than the other participants, so if he could get through, the rest of the group could too. At 2 o'clock, they entered the cave through its 16 by 28-inch entrance and stopped in a room inside. Donald was on the eastern side and noticed several smaller tunnels leading from the room. However, because they weren't sure which passages would be too narrow, Donald decided to check one. It involved a tight squeeze but appeared to open to another section, so he tried to push through. The squeeze measured 18 by 20 inches, so tight that
I would say this is about 18 inches, maybe here. I'm not fitting. Look at my shoulders. Look at my shoulders. There's 0% chance I'm getting through that. And you guys have not seen my glutes yet. We'll say that. There's no way that dump truck's fitting either. And I gotta say, there are some thick boys out there. Not to be weird, like I know that's a weird thing to say, but there's some Boy Scouts out there that eat too many Girl Scout cookies, if you know what I'm saying. They're heavy. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys are jumbo size and can't fit either.
Couldn't move his arms backward or lift his head to see ahead. He was followed by his sons, and while moving forward thanks to the mud, making the terrain slippery, he reported back to them what was happening. Everything seemed normal until something unexpected occurred. As he pulled himself along, he realized the ground below him was disappearing. Donald slipped down into a tight crevice, and the slick mud prevented him from stopping his slide. His hands were trapped, leaving him no leverage to pull himself up. Making matters worse, the path angled about 30 degrees, so he had to fight against gravity. The crevice was just 5 inches wide, and the slippery mud caused his body to settle more and more. He told his sons to pull on his feet, but after several failed attempts, he told them to get the other adult in the cave, Jim. After a while, Jim also realized they wouldn't be able to free Donald on their own. Donald explained that some rocks had loosened when he slid and were now wedging against his body. Each time they tried to pull him backward, the loose rocks would slide forward and block the passage. Jim exited the cave to call for help. Cave rescue specialists and the police arrived.
See, here, I don't know how they don't get him out because they have so much time and they know where he is. They know what the problem is. They know the issue. Surely there's some sort of like mechanism they have to get the rocks off him. They pull him out and we're good. I don't know how this leads to a death here.
Person could squeeze into that narrow space at a time, they tried using ropes to free Donald. This didn't work either, so they brought in tools to try breaking some of the rocks.
Yeah, like
However,
chisels.
Given how tight the space was, hours of work led to only small breakthroughs, and Donald's situation grew worse. He was thirsty, hungry, and in a very cold environment, so hypothermia was a major.
I feel like these are addressable too. I mean, I know there's not that much space down there, but they do make, like generators where you could potentially hook up a heater to generate some heat that way. You can surely, like, a worst case scenario, just try chucking water down there and have him lick it up or whatever it might be. I know that's gross, but this is a case where you do anything possible to survive. Like, how could they not even get him water at all? Or food too? Like, I feel like there's gotta be a way.
Water, but they found that the passage leading to where he laid was extremely narrow. Only 2 very small cavers, sisters Lynn and Nancy Taylor, were able to fit, but even then, they couldn't reach Donald's head. This meant there was no way of delivering supplies, so rescuers had to act quickly. They decided to dig from above ground, down to where Donald was stuck. The process lasted all day Sunday, getting them close to the required depth. Unfortunately, though, they were about 12 feet away from Donald's position, so they needed to dig laterally. Meanwhile, Donald began giving only grunting responses, which indicated he was likely suffering from hypothermia. On Monday morning, as 2 days passed from when he got stuck, the digging continued, but the team encountered another problem: extremely hard bedrock layers that were impossible to dig through. At this point, they weren't sure if Donald was still alive, so they sent a nurse into the cave with a handheld Doppler machine to see if he still had a pulse. She couldn't detect one, but this wasn't definitive proof of death. breath since she only had access to his very cold legs. Sometimes, the body's core organs can continue functioning after the extremities have stopped registering a pulse. Seeing how quickly Donald's condition was deteriorating, rescuers started using their most extreme tools, including dynamite, which was extremely risky but appeared to be the only option left. On Tuesday morning, they finally managed to reach his location, and a doctor was sent in immediately, but as many feared, Donald had died. It took an entire day to retrieve his body, and an autopsy later confirmed he had succumbed to hypothermia sometime between Sunday night—
I hate to say it, but I feel like that's still preventable. Like, how is there, even if you can't bring a generator, like, I understand generators are big and clunky and you might not be able to bring them into the cave. Get like a fire, like get a torch. There has to be, well, I guess that would make smoke and then make it harder to breathe. I don't know. There's gotta be a way though to get heat down there when you have days of notice like that this is happening. There has to be a way.
Agent Allwedd incident.
Man.
Roger Solari and Martin Farr, aged 26 and 23 respectively, wanted to map out the Agent Allwedd cave system in South Wales. At the time, John Parker, another explorer, had abandoned the mission after discovering a third sump in one of its longest passages. Martin and Roger, however, wanted to keep going to see what lay beyond. The first trip was done by Martin alone, because Roger had hurt his knee, making it extremely dangerous for Martin to continue solo. Reaching the third sump was a feat in itself, since the route was not only tortuous, but also extremely long, lasting for hours, as the first sump was about a mile into the cave. The first two sumps measured only 249 feet and 82 feet, so Martin passed through them relatively easily. However, the third sump was much longer, and nobody had fully explored it yet, so Martin could only hope he had enough air to reach the end. Fortunately, he managed to swim through it, about 850 feet, and on the other side he found something else interesting, a zigzagging passage roughly 1,800 feet long, leading to another sump. Nobody had known about this fourth sump, and Martin realized he probably wouldn't have enough air to explore it and then return. He spent the next 4 to 5 hours heading back out, planning to wait for Roger so they could tackle Sump 4 together on the next trip. When they returned on June 15, 1974, both Roger and Martin brought extra air tanks. They successfully reached Sump 4 and began diving it with a guideline to help map the route.
I mean, so far, I got nothing bad to say. Like, normally, there's some things that you feel like are preventable as you go. I was going to say, like, why would you go that far if you didn't have that much air? But he turned around, he went back, he decided to prepare for this fourth sump. He got the oxygen needed, and now they're going together. The only thing I'm worried about, though, is, like, I don't know how small this tunnel is, this little cave is, and if it's so small to where only one person can go at a time, if the guy in front gets stuck, the guy behind is cooked. He's stuck down there in water, and I don't know if he'll be able to like turn around. And if he can't turn around and you're in water, you only have as much time to live as your air tank has left.
After about 400 feet, Roger finished his guideline, and he had sinus problems, even though it wasn't the first time. Despite this, they decided to continue.
Oh,
Martin
no.
then took out his own guideline, and they kept going.
I actually went scuba diving recently, and sinus problems is like, that is a big problem for scuba diving. Can't be having that. That's a sign to turn around.
Made an important mistake. In cave diving, there is a concept called the rule of thirds for air consumption. If you use 1/3 of your air supply on the way in, you need another third to get out, leaving the final third as an emergency reserve.
Right, I learned that too.
Already used their first third and should have turned back when Roger's line ran out. Because Roger had a smaller tank than Martin, Martin assumed Roger would head out while he continued forward. He eventually came to a gravel wall of rock, which could have indicated—
Okay, see, this is where I'm getting to the point, like, where I'm seeing some flaws in what's going on here. Why would you assume that he's turning around? He's still with you. You can still see him. How are you assuming that he turned around when he's right there? Tell him to turn around.
The sump was ending, and possibly an air pocket. By this point, he was well past the halfway mark of his tank.
Oh my
so
God.
It was becoming extremely risky. He pushed on until he reached solid rock, confirming there was no air pocket. Spotting a passage to the right, he explored another 29 feet.
He's still
but it ended in a
going?
dead end. When he backtracked, he was shocked to see Roger still there. Martin quickly signaled that they had to return. Roger, likely realizing he didn't have enough air to make it back, attempted to locate the same air pocket Martin had been searching for. Martin continued about 130 feet until his main tank ran out, forcing him to switch to a reserve tank. That would give him only about 300 feet in Sump 4 and another 850 feet in Sump 3.
How much oxygen is in a reserve? Is that half, a quarter, a third? I'm not really sure how to evaluate that. Because at first I was really mad that he let his oxygen get to 0. That feels like you're a noob. Like no expert would let that happen. But if you have a reserve that is the same amount of oxygen as the main, then I'd say, all right, yeah, you're good then.
However, he had previously placed a partially filled tank between sump 3 and sump 2,
all right,
and
well,
he aimed to reach that. Finally emerging from
good.
sump 4, Martin sat on the bank, waiting for Roger, who, remember, had a smaller tank. If he didn't appear soon, it would be a huge problem. After 20 minutes with no sign of Roger, Martin realized that if Roger had surfaced from sump 4 at that moment, he likely wouldn't have enough air left to get through sump 3. After an hour, Martin was certain Roger's air had run out.
He's dead
Martin
already.
entered the
like, this isn't a regular cave where if you lose somebody for an hour, you'd be like, oh crap, you know, I should probably go find him and make sure he's okay. If you're in an underwater, like we all know that it takes a minute, 2 minutes without oxygen underwater, you're dead. Or you're, you know, you're unconscious, whatever it might be. If you wait an hour, he's dead already, bro. Like that's way too long to wait.
And
there's
tried
no way
pulling
he's
the
alive.
guideline to make it tense, but it didn't. It was no longer connected. It had been cut at about the 430-foot mark.
How?
This was probably where Roger needed to change tanks. Because switching them wasn't a simple task at the time, he might have put his arm through the line to avoid losing it, twisted his body to reach the valve, and become tangled, forcing him to cut the line to move freely. This, combined with the silt kicked up by movement, likely reduced his visibility, and he may have swum the wrong way. At that point, there was no doubt Roger had exhausted his air. Martin stayed calm and managed to navigate the next 3 sumps safely. He alerted the authorities immediately, and the search for Roger's body began. Martin himself joined the search, along with many others. However, Roger's remains were not found until 1986, 12 years later.
How?
Recovering the body was deemed too risky, so it was left in the cave, and a plaque was placed near the entrance of Sump 1 in Roger's honor. In 1987, another explorer passed through Sump 4 and finally located the air pocket, 875 feet in, the very one Roger and Martin had hoped to find. It was called the Against All Odds Chamber. Martin stated that after this incident, he never broke the rule of thirds again. He went on to have a remarkable diving career. Today, the entrance to the cave system is locked, and only specific, experienced divers are granted a key.
Wait, so did he end up finding that air pocket? Because that's, I mean, I guess so, because I swear that's where you said the body was found. And if that's the case, then this was like the first incident where he probably ended up like staying in that air pocket for a while until there was no air left or until he starved or whatever it might be. That's just the worst. That is the worst. I will never go caving ever.
Floyd Collins incident. In late December 1924, Floyd Collins discovered a cave called Sand Cave, which was easily accessible to tourists because it was near a highway. He quickly struck a deal with the land's owners to receive 50% of any profits from the cave's exploration.
Wait, what profits would you get? I thought people go caving like for fun, like just to explore and adventure. But for profits, what do they get? Like, is there gold in there? Is that what he's trying to find? I've actually never heard of that.
He immediately began working there. Since there was no
significant
entrance, however, many tourists avoided it. As a result, Floyd spent hours every day over the next few weeks digging deeper and deeper. On January 30th, 1925, it was snowing outside, and once again, Floyd went into the cave, only to find something shocking. Crawling forward with a lantern, he reached what was known as the turnaround room, called that way because many cavers would stop there and turn around, deeming it too risky to continue. The only way to go farther was through a tiny narrow hole called the squeeze, which measured only 9 inches in height.
I mean, I don't want to say, like, I want to respect these guys, you know, and what they do is crazy. But like, what do you think is gonna happen? 9 inches? 9. What, this big? My head sideways barely fits in that. I think it would. This way, no chance. There's no chance. There's no way.
Floyd, however, managed to push through. Beyond the squeeze, he saw a narrow pit dropping about 10 feet. He went down feet first and reached the bottom, where he found yet another pit. Squatting down, he removed the remaining rocks and debris and finally saw an opening into the main cave.
This guy's crazy.
He tied a rope in place and descended an 80-foot drop. Reaching the cavern floor, he was amazed by the sight, but noticed his light was starting to dim. Wanting to avoid being left in the dark, he climbed back up the 80-foot drop and began returning, moving backwards and pushing his lantern with his shoulder. Unfortunately, his lantern slipped into a tiny hole and shattered, leaving him in total darkness. Because the cavern was extremely unstable, Floyd knew he had to move carefully to avoid dislodging loose rocks.
Wait, what year was this? 1924. Yeah, that'll do it. I was gonna say, why don't we have flashlights? That's exactly why.
Avoid dislodging loose rocks. Unable to see, however, he kicked one loose, and it fell onto his left leg, trapping him. He tried freeing himself with his right leg, but the more he moved, the more rocks tumbled down, further wedging him in place. It was 10 a.m.
Just imagine being in that situation, and when like the realization hits that you cannot move. You're stuck. Pitch darkness, alone. I actually don't want to think about that too much. It's gonna freak me out.
Began shouting for help, hoping someone would hear him. He remained there all day, and by 9 a.m. the next morning, nearly 24 hours after he had become trapped, 2 of the cave's owners arrived with their 17-year-old son, Jewel Estes, to check on him. They saw Floyd's coat hanging outside the cave and called his name, but no one answered, so they ventured deeper. Before long, the 2 owners turned back because the passages were too tight, but Jewel continued and eventually found Floyd, who asked him to call his brothers for help. Soon, Marshall Collins, Floyd's brother, and Lee Collins, Floyd's father, reached the entrance, finding a growing crowd watching the rescue attempt. Marshall and another man went inside to widen the passage, digging carefully so as not to send loose rocks tumbling onto.
See, I feel like here's another situation where, like, obviously it's a terrible situation, but they have access to his head, so they should be able to give him water and food. If you can bring lanterns down there, that is a source of heat, so he shouldn't die of hypothermia. I know it's 1924, but so like they don't have like generators and stuff like that, but a lantern, that should be okay, right? As far as like some sort of heat.
4 p.m., Floyd's other brother Homer arrived. Floyd had previously asked Homer to come along that day, so Homer felt guilty for refusing and did his best to help. He did reach Floyd, but a new problem emerged. The crowds outside had started multiple bonfires. The melting ice funneled water into the cave.
How does no one notice that? Oh my god. No, that actually makes me mad. And how do the cavers not relay the message? Like, hey, there's some water coming in here. Stop it now. Stop. I just feel like there's so many people at fault. Like, this is so avoidable.
And sending freezing cold water down toward
Floyd.
Oh
my god.
After 8 hours with Floyd, his brothers had to rest. Upon emerging, Homer grew furious at the huge crowd, telling people to leave if they couldn't help. However, none of them listened. Reporters began arriving, hoping to interview Homer. Tired of the questions, he told them to see for themselves inside the cave. Confusion and rumors spread. Some claimed Floyd was already dead or that the cave had collapsed entirely. Determined to prove otherwise, Marshall offered a $500,000 reward to anyone who saved his brother. As rumors spread more, however, he went in to check on Floyd himself and found him alive. Floyd managed to free one hand, suggesting they tie a rope around his chest to pull him out. But as soon as they tried, he begged them to stop, saying he felt like he was being pulled in two. Homer worked continuously, removing dirt and debris until he was utterly exhausted and needed medical attention. By Tuesday night, 95 hours after Floyd had become trapped, a reporter named Skeets entered the cave and installed a light bulb near Floyd. While removing rubble, Skeets exposed more of Floyd's legs, but still couldn't free him. His story and interview with Floyd were published, drawing even larger crowds. Hotels nearby were filled, and at least 1,000 people gathered around Sand Cave.
I mean, back in 1994, I guess these guys had literally nothing else to do. There's people just camping around the cave. Hundreds of people. Hotels are getting full. That's insane. Obviously, they didn't have TikTok back then.
All this activity further weakened the cave walls, putting it at risk of collapse, though nobody realized it at the time, as everyone was rooting for Floyd. At hour 123, the entrance to the pit collapsed, blocking any access to Floyd and cutting off deliveries of food and water. By hour 144, a team of workers formed to dig a new tunnel to reach him. The only way they could know if Floyd was still alive was the light bulb Skeets had installed. It was connected to another bulb outside, which would flicker when Floyd breathed. They dug relentlessly, but with no food or water.
How do they have that contraption? That seems insane. There's a light bulb that flickers the light bulb at the top if he breathes? What the wizardry is that? That seems like an insane contraption and an amazing one that we should still use today. I've never heard of it. I've watched a lot of cave death videos. I've never seen that before. What?
Combined with the cold temperature, his chances were fading quickly. By Friday, February 13th, the men had nearly reached him, and one worker reported hearing groaning about 10 feet away. However,
I gotta call cap on that. I have been in caves before, and if there's you cannot hear that. There's 10 feet of rock in between you. I don't care how loud you're yelling. You don't hear groaning. There's no way that's true.
30 a.m. on February 16th, a worker reached Floyd and found him already deceased. Initially, Floyd's body was left in the cave. After some time, though, his brother Homer arranged for its removal and gave him a proper burial.
Wow, that is just tragic. It's just so sad. The worst ones are the ones I feel like are avoidable. It just doesn't sit well with me. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed that video and want me to watch even more cave deaths, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and click right here to watch another awesome video.